Hello and welcome to Ligature Valley, a type design critique podcast for designers who want to think deeper than the algorithm. I'm your host, Caleb Dean, and each week I break down typefaces, both new releases and custom commissions, using a clear rubric that looks at originality, craft, functionality, and cultural impact. Today we're going to be looking at Typeface by Pangram Pangram, Kyoto. Now, I love Pangram Pangram. I've followed them for a number of years. I've been in the orbit of some of their type designers and just admired their founder for a long time. And man, oh man, these guys put out a lot of typefaces. One of the things I love about their practice is that they're always producing more work. And one of the things in design and art, and of course type design, is that producing and production of the craft is just one of the best ways to get good, to figure out what is and isn't working. And Kyoto feels like this really beautiful version of a production. Let's put it out because we have this idea and let's see what happens, or even if it sticks. Now, according to their website, what sets Kyoto apart isn't just its form, its origin and its story. It's born from a typographic exploration of Japanese writing systems. The typeface began as a conceptual study and matured over the years into a robust design system. The goal is to bridge the aesthetic of Latin slab serifs with the calligraphic spirit of hiragana and katakana, creating a typographic voice that resonates across languages and cultures. Now, it has 9 weights from thin to heavy, matching italics, and a full Latin plus Japanese character set. Pangram's Kyoto is engineered for bilingual typography, which is claiming to offer seamless integration in multilingual layouts. So we're going to take a look at this landing page. We're going to break down each category and see how ultimately this thing scores and how beautiful it is. So looking at the landing page, it's another dedicated site. And what's really lovely about this launch is that it comes with some practical applications. I really love when Type Foundry releases content that has a practical use of their typeface. Like maybe they've been working on this typeface for a long time. Some people have used it and they've worked out the kinks, and now they're showing us imagery. I always think that that is a really lovely way to launch typefaces and show it to designers in the wild. Though it comes with the caveat of like, is that the only context that we can see this typeface in? So we're going to scroll past these 2 coffee cup mock-ups and into some of the other forms. Now, every time I see these really heavy terminal like dot ones, I think of American Typewriter or Archer or even Quadrant Sans. I think Actual Source uses Quadrant Sans, or at least they did use them for a long time. But it has, especially when it goes into italics, there's something about the thinner strokes that mimic the human hand, and those like huge ink swells that have this really interesting color and texture. Overall, it does seem like a typeface that's meant for a print publication, right? Like I think the mock-ups showing, what is this, a coffee store paired with some hand drawings or some hand textures. I think that pairs rightly with what this typeface belongs to, where it would fit well. Yeah, here they're showing a mock-up of almost a paper bag with it printed on. The contrast of this heavy ink swell typeface with a hand drawing of like a garbage can, or maybe that's a bin, I'm not sure. But that paired next to the poster with like smaller paragraph text, it's just 2 columns at the top. I think that that is really the case where this typeface would work. Pro tip for whoever types at this is like at least allow some hyphenation in the middle there, because these 2 lines in here get really heavy word spacing. There's some InDesign settings y'all can set to allow stretching of characters or spaces between words to help the spaces in between your words be more uniform and sort of less distracting. But this typeface comes with the works, especially seeing as it is going to work with a Japanese character set. There's, of course, some really standard ligatures they have here that look great. I have no problem with any of the ligatures. I love when, of course, there's going to be old-style figures in this typeface. Like, old-style figures like have to make sense with this type of handwriting. I really do wish, though, that there was more about the Japanese characters. Like, I wish that we got to see more of the Japanese characteristics coming with this project. You sort of get to the end of the landing page, like it's showing us the commercial licenses, And the only place that I could see or find, I guess if there's say we do see all glyphs, we can scroll down, there we go. Okay, so there's more that you like have to almost uncover to get to Japanese characteristics. But it's really hard for me, especially as I'm a single language bound American who, I only look at Latin characters. It's really hard for me to compare what this would look like. Now, of course, if you were a native speaker or spoke both languages and read both languages, then it'd probably be easier to compare the characteristics of one character set versus the other. But they feel a little bit disparate to me. And maybe that's just that the writing styles come from such different tool origins, right? Like a Japanese writing coming from a bamboo brush and Latin writing coming from carving in stone. Like the tools of production and how those characters got made is so different that it's probably, this is probably a really wonderful unity of Japanese characters with Latin characters. But I would like to see more of it. I think seeing more of it, this is the only frame where they are put together, and it's sort of hard for me to sort out whether or not these work together well. Italic version of the typeface works better, but before I digress too much more, let's start breaking down each of the characteristics, each of the categories. First, we'll start with originality. It does feel really original depending on the current situation. I think more and more type foundries are putting out more and more sans serif fonts as a way to appeal to a broader audience, as a way to get into digital devices, particularly if we can start to require subscription format for web page views. That economically makes more sense for a type design foundry than the one-off purchase of a book. And so it feels like Pangram is taking a chance, hoping that this typeface gets purchased multiple times rather than once or twice and is renewed annually in perpetuity. As I said, of some of those comparison fonts earlier, it's definitely different than an Archer. It's way more upscale and calculated than an American typewriter, but it does feel really close to a Quadrant. I'll see if I can find it for those who are going to join the visual podcast. Yes, so if you go to matterofsorts.com, it's a website that has a couple of fonts and books and custom projects. And Quadrant, the font there, done with collaborator Stuart Geddes in 2018, this one feels really similar. It's a little bit more uniform in its stroke variants, but the way that it has the ink swell terminals, although not on the S, it does on the C. The I dot is really heavy in the A, the R. The S is different. Let's see, does the S have a swell here too? No, the S has no swell in Kyoto either. So I think that the way that those are working, those feel really similar. Of course, the nuance being that it comes in Japanese, and that's so interesting in the way that this typeface gets packaged, why that particular typeface. I'm sure that culturally there are more things going on in Japan than I'm privy to, and that Pangram is probably more privy to. So originality, we're going to score pretty high, maybe a 19 or 20. We'll do a 20, because right now in this current state, I think that not a lot of type foundries are putting out this kind of font, especially launching it with multiple character sets that are so far outside of a Latin character set. And that's going to take us into design and craft. Pangram is also one of those foundries that the craft is really beautiful. They really have a hard time missing. What's particularly difficult to me in trying to nail this kind of a typeface is getting a nice even visual rhythm in large bodies of text. Because of the way that the strokes are weighted differently in the thicks and thins, the way that the ink drop terminals play such a huge visual factor is really tough to balance. So when I'm looking at a paragraph that's typeset, when we look at the overall color of the paragraph, it's really beautiful. And there's always this weird balance of having something that's peppered or salted with characters and having something that's completely even. And there's always a tension that designers some designers prefer the perfectly, beautifully even texture, and that's why we love sans serifs so much. And others like a little bit of sea salt on their sweets. And I think that this is the sea salt on a really good chocolate chip cookie. It's just peppered in there, really beautifully, really evenly coated. If you're from the South, it's the way that you pour pepper on a brisket before you smoke it, right? Like a really beautifully even coat of these little splatterings of color, but not so thick that you get lost in it or it becomes its own block. In that sense, it really is a beautiful collection of letters, not a collection of really beautiful letters. When I look at letters like the E or the C in italic, the outstrokes feel really awkward to me. They feel tucked in quite a bit more than some of the other letter forms do. And then when you pay attention to like the outstrokes of the D or the A, the tail that comes up, it feels like it comes up so high on its own that it feels just a little bit awkward. And sometimes I think that happens to a lowercase g, that second story feels so flat, or the S can feel thin when it's put next to an O or a capital D or characters with bigger strokes. This extra bold version here of Kyoto with the M and S together, that moment feels pretty rough actually. So if I type the letters S and M together back and forth really frequently, it feels really rough, not gonna lie. Let's see if it's better in a regular version. It gets better in regular. It's probably even worse in heavy, yeah? Oh, not too bad in italic. Yeah, this is like the weird instance where each letter is kind of awkward on its own, but together they get really beautiful. Falls apart, maybe not as visually consistent in the heavier modes, but again, that's probably because they're pushing the thicks and the thin and that contrast really far, and they're neglecting to have a display version or like a text exclusive version. Sometimes we see that where there's a display version and we have qualities of the typeface that are meant to stand out in headlines at bigger sizes, and then we reduce those a little bit in the text sizes so that it's easier and just, I don't know, feels better than this SM combo here. I also don't know how often SM happens, but design and craft, it's still going to be pretty well crafted. We'll give it a 19 out of 20 because it's not this phenomenal groundbreaking thing. And I'm not quite sure, again, how we tie into the just Japanese characters or if we tie in quite as well. Before we move on to the next section, I'd like to remind you that the audio portion of this episode is available wherever you listen to podcasts. But if you like to see what I'm actually talking about, clicking through, highlighting the letter forms, spacing, these sort of mockups that they're making, you can subscribe for just a few dollars a month at www.ligatureValley.com. Don't forget to share this with your other design friends who want to listen to type design endlessly. Okay, so now breaking into function. The functionality of the typeface is going to be a little bit higher just because we're bringing in more than Latin characters, but also not crazy high because I don't think it's a variable access. Oh, it is variable, never mind, which is really lovely. But it doesn't have a text or display version, and it does come with a few Greek characters, some extended Latin characters, some general punctuations, subscripts, superscripts, one currency symbol, no, I guess 2, 3, who knows? A set of arrows, who doesn't love arrows as designers? We loved enclosed numbers and black dot letters and all sorts of other symbols and punctuations for other languages, specifically Japanese in this one. So functionally, like I said, I think this one will feel and fit more appropriately in print applications, or at least applications where there's larger bodies of text that people want to spend time with. This typeface to me really feels like a font that has to do with content that requires time. And maybe that's like a reflection of a Japanese cultural influence versus an American or European, a quick, more transactional feel to it. That's probably one of the reasons that they are showing their mock-ups in a coffee shop. You know, it's not like a stainless steel door, but it's a wooden door with recycled cups, like a windbreaker ruffle jacket. I don't know what kind of jacket that person's wearing, but it feels like a context that somebody's going to sit down and spend time doing an activity. I think this typeface feels really similar, and that feels like the application of this typeface is going to make most sense in this slowing down, spending time, and not reading quickly. So functionally, it scores high because of its character set, scores high because of its multiple languages and different character set. It just marked down maybe because of the distinguishment between what a headline is and what a text style is. Although even, when you have really beautiful, unique characters like you have here, it is, makes just as much sense to set it in a heading style and love the purity of the forms. That's like a really designerly thing. I can set this in a large text, and I'm sure hundreds and hundreds of other designers would be really comfortable setting this in a large text on its own, but I also know that many other people won't be as comfortable setting this in a large headline version without having that like headline version of the font. So we're going to do 23. That's pretty generous, but 23 for function. That's pretty generous. Oh well, it's down. I wrote it in Sharpie. Lastly, we're going to do cultural impact. And what I love about projects like this in that it's rooted in a cross-cultural effort and a cross-cultural attentiveness. I think culturally what that does is immediately anybody who's thinking about using this typeface, whether it be for the Japanese version or the Latin version, looks at it and immediately pays attention to the other culture. So it does an amazing job of bridging the gap and at least bringing attention to something new, something that probably a designer didn't wake up and think they were going to think about that day. And for that reason, it is really nice culturally. I don't know if this is going to catch on like wildfire. No, I don't imagine that a huge brand is going to take this on. Although Barnes & Noble would probably crush with this kind of a font. I think where this typeface falls down functionally for large brands is where it steps up culturally for small boutique bespoke brands that want to have a more nice to meet you, how are you doing, welcome to my walnut table with, I don't know, like the kind of stuff behind me in this office feel to it, maybe not quite this polished. So on one hand, big brand, big scale wise, I don't think it's going to do much. And on the other hand, from a small scale, from a subtle and nuanced version, I think it's going to do a whole lot. And it's going to be a typeface that we sort of see for a long time. It's going to like pop up. And every time it pops up, we'll go, oh, wow, that's a really beautiful typeface. But think that it's so perfect for that one application that we don't go and hunt it down to add to our catalog. Now, for the niche of small business designers who are bridging the gap between Latin languages and Japanese languages, this is amazing. Like how beautiful. Like I can't think of the number of times that I've been to a Japanese steakhouse in the United States, and they all have this same sort of design, which is like very broken. Like one is the Americanized restaurant, and the other half is the very Japanese version of the restaurant. And they're sort of surprised if either side orders from the other menu. And I think this could be like a fascinating overlap between the two. I think it would make for like a beautiful clothing brand, a coffee shop that's like exclusively matchas. I really hope that's Japanese, but something where the niche of overlap between an Americanized culture and a Japanese culture and the like really beautiful output that those two things have together, I think is going to ultimately like hugely benefit from this kind of a typeface. So cultural impact will score sort of mid-table. Halfway in the middle is 12.5. I think it's a little bit higher than that, maybe a 16 or 17, just for the niche output that it's going to have. Again, I think this is going to show up in a lot of designerly publications, particularly if there's designerly publications coming, out of Japanese design. There's always seems to be a gap or a need or an overlap between Japanese design, ideology, and aesthetics and Western culture ideas, designs, and aesthetics. And there's such a beautiful overlap in those that I think that this typeface will find its way into those quite frequently. And to that point, this is going to have more cultural impact than I'm going to give it credit for. But for this scale, and at the moment, we'll leave it at 18. I talked myself into another point. 18. So for originality, we have a 20. For design and craft, we have a 19. For function, we have a 23. And for cultural impact, we have an 18, bringing our total to a nice even 80. I didn't quite expect it to be an 80, but when I think about how nuanced and how sharp it is, someday, somewhere, a project is going to come up, and this typeface is going to be the only answer to it. In those cases, it's 100% deserving of that B- rating. I really need to stop thinking about these on like a grade scale, because all of these production-wise deserve an A+, like they're phenomenal projects. It's as soon as I bring in the originality and cultural impact that they start to lose points. Maybe again to remind myself and audience viewers that I'm not rating this as a B- or an 80 out of 100 because it's an ugly typeface. No, there's like huge scores in craft and function and it's a beautiful project, but the way that it enters our lives and the impact that it's going to have from clients through designers to, typographists. Wow, what a terrible, that sounds like the overthrow. Typographists, from type designers through graphic designers to clients. The impact these typefaces have is always much more variable than the quality of the output. So thanks for listening to this episode of Ligature Valley. If today's critique gave you something to think about, whether a font to reconsider or consider for the first time, I urge you to consider subscribing wherever you get your podcasts. And if you want to go deeper or see the visuals, what I'm clicking through, support the work, and the extended video versions, for just a few dollars a month, you can do that at www.ligatureValley.com. Your support is going to keep this show independent, ad-free, and rooted in thoughtful, long-form design critique. Until next time, keep your eyes sharp and your matcha warm? Cold. Keep your matcha anything but room temperature. Peace.